Today I want to show you how to go into the Canvas Dropbox and find the lessons that we will be using for the year. So the first thing you'll do is you'll pull up your browser, and I simply type in A+ College Ready and go to their webpage. At the top, you'll see a link to Canvas. Click on that, and you'll enter your information, log in. You'll want to go to the A+ College Ready ELA 6 through 10 curricula. And then you see click on files to see courses. So you click on the files. We're interested in English 9. Today's lesson comes from the second 9 weeks. And this is lesson 15, Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. So we'll open that, and there is the lesson. So I want to go into the one I already have open so that I can show with annotations for with Cami here. We start this lesson. There's some about this lesson information that's always important to read. Then they want to show you text complexity and all the different standards that are touched on in this lesson. We have teaching suggestions, and I'm just going to really encourage you to read through these teaching suggestions. They offer some really great questions to consider about Daedalus and Icarus. Of course, we've done a lesson with summarizing, observing, and questioning to help introduce them to Daedalus and Icarus before they start reading before they start analyzing the image. There's also some information here about the painting. It's Peter Bruegel. Here's a link to, it's an image of Peter Bruegel and tells a little bit about him. Also, we have this optic strategy. It's overview, parts, title or text, interrelationships, and conclusion. And of course, when we think about those interrelationships, we're talking about the interrelationships between the parts of the painting, the overview, the title, the text, and the conclusion. So we want them to pay close attention to that. There are also some guiding questions when you get to activity 2 when we analyze the poem. Of course, here, if you need some help scaffolding, you can come back to that, where it asks them to work through the punctuation. They give you kind of an answer key here as well. So just be sure that you read through those teaching suggestions because they're very helpful. There's a comparison contrast scoring guide, and then we finally come to the lesson. Now, when they start this lesson, you're going to want to project that image onto the board. And so the title of the painting is Landscape with the Fall of Icarus, and that's going to be so important for them to understand why the title is important. So, Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. And of course, we need that in italics, if it will let me do that, and it might not. It won't. Okay, it's fine. The artist, again, let's move that up just a shade. The artist is Peter Bruegel. Bruegel. And then I'm going to move over, share my screen so that you can see the image. And as you're looking at it, I want you to be thinking about this brief description of the scene depicted in the painting. What are your kids going to see? What are they going to write down? And how are they going to do this? Are they going to go top to bottom? Is there going to be something that catches their eye and they go from there and they move out? But it's just a scene. What's depicted? So let me show you the image, and you be thinking about those things. Of course, the eye is naturally drawn to this piece because it's the center of the painting and it's the only real bright color in there. We also, sometimes the kids will be drawn immediately to the water, but because this is in the foreground, it tends to draw their eye more. There's a lot going on. We got this guy looking up, we got the sheep, we have a fisherman down here, we have a boat, we have a town out here, we have the sun. It looks like maybe the sun's going down. But the one thing that our kids seldom see is Icarus. So when we think about the title of this painting, Landscape with the Fall of Icarus, it actually puts the focus on the landscape and not the fact that Icarus has fallen into the water and is drowning. Kids always want to ask, is this guy like trying to save him? And we really think he's a fisherman. So they're going to write down, there's a plowman, a shepherd, a ship, a town. So eventually you'll want to draw their eye to this little insignificant blob in the water that is Icarus's legs. So when we go back to the lesson, you'll just jot down some of those things here. We also want to draw a focus to imagery and mood. In the first 9 weeks, we talk about tone with the Scarlet Ibis a little bit, and mood to some extent. But we just want to have the kids know this is how the work makes the reader feel. So we're going to get them to think about a mood based on the image that they are studying. So there's a chart for them to complete, and I typically will put things up in my room and have the kids take sticky notes and go. Each group would put a sticky note for every sound. I'm so frustrated with that. I apologize again. For the sounds that they would hear, things that they would taste, sight, smell, touch. So thinking back on that image, and I'm going to go back to it so that we can look at that. You might would hear the animals. You might would hear the water splashing. You might would hear the wind blowing in those sails. The voices of the people. They don't seem to be talking, but you never know. You might would smell the animals, the salty earth, the salty air, the freshly plowed earth, the things that you might would see, the sun, the animals. They might say Icarus. The people working, the town in the distance, smells, that newly plowed ground, the fishy, smelly water. My students always say the sweaty plowman because they feel like with all these clothes on, he's got to be sweating. Then the things that they might could touch, the warmth of the sun, the breeze in the sails, the fresh earth, the sheep, those kinds of things. So you're just going to want them to really deep dive into that, because what we're really getting them to see is this peaceful, tranquil setting. And we want to kind of lead them to this idyllic, peaceful, quiet, tranquil setting is also maybe a little bit lonely. Each person is doing his own thing and detached. This guy is detached from this guy. Did he see Daedalus? Did he hear Icarus? Did he see something come over him and land in the water? The kids are always concerned about that. But notice that his back is to the action. And this guy is absorbed in what he's doing, and he's absorbed in what he's doing. So that's important to get the kids to pull that out, lead them to those ideas so that they build this mood. Because as we go through the lesson now, we give them a frame to get them to describe the mood of the painting. So the most important thing that we need to draw here is while Icarus is drowning, because that's a pretty big deal for a man to be drowning in the water. What are the others doing? They're working or fishing or carrying on with their daily routines. The mood of the painting can best be described as, and we just pull from that mood box, detached, lonely, tranquil, which demonstrates the idea that life continues to move on even when it ends for others. So from there, we're going to go into the theme. And again, there are many, many answers that can come here, here, and here. These are just examples. Let your kids work through that, work through it with them, and y'all can come up with probably better answers than we have here. So the theme, we want to talk about what a theme is. Kids always want to say it's the central message of a work. Well, it is, but there's more to it. It's that idea that the author is trying to convey about the subject. So I really wanted to think about what is the statement being made about life or human nature. This takes away from Icarus is, or the painter portrays Icarus as unimportant or insignificant. This goes back to this theme about the statement about life or human nature. So question 5 asks them to look at what they said about question 4 and think about how the details that create that mood reveal Bruegel's general statement about life or human nature. And so what does this have to say about the human experience? Sometimes we often focus on details of our own lives and fail to notice a crisis in others' lives. We could also go back to that idea that, life moves on regardless of tragic circumstances and such. So then they need to pull 3 or more specific details from the painting that support the theme. And so with mine, they fail to notice the sun still sets, the plowman continues to plow, the fisherman is still fishing. So we want them to be able to pull together and give us just a brief idea of that thematic statement about the painting and support it. Now, activity 2, and this is where I showed you in the beginning, the first question asked them to punctuate. So this is William Carlos Williams, a piece of poetry by him. Those of you who are familiar with William Carlos Williams, you'll be familiar with the way that he writes. Ekphrastic poetry, that's what this is called. This poetry was written about that work of art. So the title is the same, Landscape with the Fall of Icarus by William Carlos Williams. And so, according to Bruegel, when Icarus fell, it was spring. A farmer was plowing his field. The whole pageantry of the year was awake, tingling, near the edge of the sea, concerned with itself, sweating in the sun that melted the wing's wax, and insignificantly off the coast, there was a splash, quite unnoticed. This was Icarus drowning. So they want you to write a description of the scene depicted in the poem. So have your kids work through that. You're going to kind of do the same thing. You're going to look at the tone now, the attitude towards the subject, character, or audience, and the connotation. So we're going to look for the positive connotations and the negative connotations. So we'll go back through, and of course, you may have to spend a little time talking about positive and negative connotations, but things like tingling and melted and insignificantly and unnoticed and spring, those types of words. So have them make that list, and then they're going to based on the words that they listed, describe the tone of the poem. So we did mood with the painting, tone with the poem, and then they're going to complete the same frame. While Icarus is drowning, the rest of the world is. And then the tone can be described, and they're going to work through that lesson as such. Then we'll come back and we'll write a thematic statement about the poem. What does it have to say about the human experience? Support that with three or more words or phrases. And then you're going to ask them to look at the two, comparing the depiction of the painting and the poem. So what's emphasized, absent, or different in the two texts, and then follow the conventions, which we don't actually ask them to write this essay. You just want to talk about the two and compare the two together. And that is the end of the Landscape with the Fall of Icarus lesson. Again, we do not ask them to write the essay. We simply ask them to talk about the differences.